The first time I tasted the bitterness, I thought it was just the lemon. It was a Tuesday morning in late October, the kind where the fog sat low over the river behind my small house in Davenport, Iowa. I remember the exact sound my glass made when I set it down on the kitchen counter. A dull, sticky thud. My hands were trembling, but I told myself it was just age. Just another reminder that I had turned 62 that spring. I had no idea my own son was watching me from the doorway. My name is Linda Carver. For 35 years, I worked as a hospital night janitor. Not a nurse, not a doctor. The one who scrubbed blood off tile floors after surgeries. The one who wiped fingerprints from the waiting room windows at 2 a.m. It was never glamorous, but it was honest. And it paid for everything my son Derek ever had. Derek was 32 then. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the same brown eyes he inherited from his father. He had always been quiet as a child, the type who studied people more than he spoke. After his father died in a warehouse accident when Derek was 9, it became just the two of us against the world. Or at least, that was what I believed. "Mom," he said that morning, too casually, "you should drink more water. Doctor says older people get dehydrated easy." I smiled weakly and took another sip from the glass he had just handed me. That was when I felt it. A strange heaviness in my chest, like my heart had suddenly gained weight. My fingers tingled. A wave of warmth flushed through my body, followed by a chill so sharp it felt like icy needles under my skin. "Linda," I whispered to myself, pressing a hand to the counter. I didn't call Derek for help. Not then. Because something inside me, some quiet instinct sharpened by decades of cleaning up after other people's messes, told me to watch first. He was watching me, not with concern, not with fear, with calculation. And that was the moment my life split cleanly into before and after. Before, I was a mother who believed her son could never betray her. After, I became a woman who would learn exactly why he wanted me weak. The dizziness faded after an hour, but it left something behind. A question lodged like a splinter in my mind. That evening, I washed the glass myself. I noticed a faint, chalky residue clinging near the rim. Not something you would see unless you were used to scrubbing medical equipment. Unless you had spent decades learning to recognize stains other people missed. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I started watching. Over the next week, I noticed small things. Derek insisted on preparing all my drinks. He suddenly became obsessed with my health, reminding me to take vitamins he had bought. He hovered when I swallowed them, and the symptoms kept coming. Fatigue, blurred vision, sudden waves of confusion. One night I nearly fainted while folding laundry. When I looked up, he was standing in the hallway again, watching. I felt something crack open inside me then. Not anger yet, not fear, a colder emotion. Recognition. I had seen that same look before in the hospital. It was the look of family members, waiting for someone to die. But the true shock came a few days later. I was searching for my reading glasses in Derek's room while he was out, something I had never done before. His desk drawer was slightly open. Inside was a small orange prescription bottle. My name was printed on the label, but I had never seen it before. And under the medication name, there was a warning that made my stomach drop. May cause confusion, memory impairment, and cardiac weakness in elderly patients. My hands shook so badly, the bottle rattled. That was when I noticed something else in the drawer. A folded legal document. I pulled it out slowly. It was a draft will. My will. And in it, everything I owned. My modest house, my retirement savings, even my late husband's old life insurance payout, had been rewritten to transfer entirely to Derek upon my incapacitation. Not death. Incapacitation. I stared at the words until they blurred. My son wasn't trying to kill me. He was trying to erase me while I was still alive. And the worst part was this. The document wasn't signed by a lawyer yet, which meant one thing. He wasn't finished. I did not cry that night. I did something far more dangerous. I pretended nothing was wrong. For the next 3 days, I drank everything Derek handed me. I swallowed the pills he placed in my palm. I smiled when he asked how I felt. I even thanked him for taking such good care of me. Inside, however, something had shifted. I stopped seeing him as my son. I started seeing him as an opponent. That shift gave me clarity, and clarity gave me power. The first step was confirmation. I needed proof, not suspicions, not feelings, evidence. So on Friday morning, when Derek left for work at the logistics company downtown, I drove to a pharmacy across town. My hands trembled on the steering wheel the entire way, not from weakness this time, but from the weight of what I was about to learn. I asked the pharmacist to examine the pills in the orange bottle. He frowned as soon as he read the label. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "this medication is usually prescribed for severe psychiatric cases or end-of-life sedation. Did your doctor explain why you need it?" I forced myself to shake my head slowly. "I never saw a doctor for this." His expression hardened. "Then someone obtained this illegally, using your information." That sentence felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. But I nodded, calmly. I had cleaned operating rooms after heart surgeries. I knew how to stay steady under pressure. I asked him for a written statement, confirming what the medication was and its effects. He hesitated at first. Then he saw something in my face. Perhaps the quiet desperation of a grandmother who had spent her entire life sacrificing for family. He printed it. That paper became my first weapon. The second came unexpectedly that same afternoon. When I returned home, Derek was in the kitchen with someone I had never seen before. A woman in her late 20s, with glossy blonde hair and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "Mom," Derek said quickly, too quickly, "this is Ashley. She's helping me with financial planning." Ashley extended her hand. Her grip was firm, assessing. "Derek says you've been having memory issues," she said sweetly. "We just want to help protect your assets." Assets. Not health, not family. Assets. I smiled politely, but inside, a storm was rising, because in that moment, everything suddenly made sense. The pills, the draft will, the watching. This wasn't just about Derek. This was about someone whispering in his ear. Someone who saw me not as a mother, but as an obstacle. And then Ashley said something that changed everything. "Well," she added lightly, "once guardianship is approved, things will be much easier for everyone." Guardianship. My heart slammed against my ribs. They weren't just planning to weaken me. They were planning to legally declare me mentally unfit, to take control of my life while I was still breathing. I felt something ignite inside me then. Not grief, not even anger. Something sharper. Resolve. I had spent decades cleaning other people's messes. Now I would clean up my own. But this time, I wouldn't use soap and water. I would use patience, because they thought I was already fading. They thought I was confused. They thought I was powerless. And that was their greatest mistake. That night, as Derek handed me another glass of lemon water, I lifted it slowly. I smiled at him. Then I said the words that began my revenge. "You're right, sweetheart," I murmured softly. "I don't feel like myself anymore." And as his eyes flickered with satisfaction, I realized something chilling. He truly believed he was winning. He had no idea I had just declared war. By the second week of November, I had mastered the art of pretending to decline. It is a strange thing, performing your own unraveling. I let my sentences trail off mid-thought. I asked Derek the same question twice within an hour. I left the television on static and stared at it when he walked into the room. Every small act was calculated, measured, controlled. The irony was not lost on me. He was trying to manufacture my confusion with medication and manipulation, while I was manufacturing it deliberately to bait him into exposing himself. On the surface, our home looked like a portrait of dutiful caregiving. Derek cooking dinner, Derek handling bills, Derek driving me to appointments that did not exist. But beneath that surface, a quiet war was unfolding. One evening, just before Thanksgiving, I overheard him on the back porch. He thought I was asleep. "She's getting worse," he whispered into his phone. "Yeah, the confusion is noticeable now. The lawyer said if we document enough episodes, a judge won't hesitate." The word judge slid through me like ice. So there it was. Not just a draft will. Not just a legal medication. A full legal strategy. I pressed my palm against the hallway wall to steady myself. My heart was racing. But not from weakness, from fury. After he hung up, I returned to my bedroom and wrote down every word I remembered. Date, time, tone, details. I had cleaned enough hospital charts to know documentation was power. The next morning, I made my move. Instead of drinking the lemon water he prepared, I waited until he left the kitchen and poured it into a sealed container I had hidden beneath the sink. I replaced it with plain water and drank that instead. By now, I had stopped taking the pills entirely, and within days, my mind felt sharper than it had in months, which confirmed everything. The confusion, the fatigue, the trembling. It had never been age. It had been betrayal. But the deeper wound was not physical. It was emotional. I found myself replaying memories of Derek as a boy. Him sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. Him crying the night his father died. Him promising at 16 that he would always take care of Mom. When had that promise twisted into this? The answer came unexpectedly on Thanksgiving Day. Ashley joined us for dinner. She wore a cream-colored sweater and carried a store-bought pie. She kissed Derek on the cheek as if the house already belonged to her. Halfway through dinner, she leaned back in her chair and said, almost casually, "Linda, do you remember telling Derek you didn't want to manage finances anymore?" I blinked slowly. I let my fork slip from my fingers. "Oh dear," I murmured. "Did I?" Derek reached for my hand, squeezing it in a way that looked comforting to an outsider, but his thumb pressed hard into my skin. A warning. "Yes, Mom," he said gently. "You've been saying you feel overwhelmed." I looked between them, and in that moment, I saw it clearly. Favoritism had never been the issue. Not really. This was manipulation, groomed and reinforced. Ashley wasn't just a girlfriend. She was an architect. And Derek was either blind or willingly complicit. I let a tear slip down my cheek. "Maybe you're right," I whispered. Inside, I was already planning my next step, because they thought they were documenting my decline. But they had no idea I had started documenting theirs. That night, after Ashley left, Derek placed a folder on the coffee table. "Mom," he said softly, "there's a lawyer coming next week. Just to discuss options. Nothing serious. Options. Guardianship. Incapacitation. Exclusion." I nodded, playing my part. But as I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted a confrontation, I would give them one. But not in my kitchen. In a courtroom. The lawyer's name was Michael Grayson. He arrived the following Wednesday, precisely at 2 in the afternoon, carrying a leather briefcase and a smile that felt rehearsed. I had dressed carefully that day. Navy slacks, a pressed blouse, light makeup, my hair brushed smooth. Not glamorous, just competent. Derek noticed. "You look nice today," he said, studying me. "I felt clear this morning," I replied mildly. Ashley sat beside him on the couch, legs crossed, pen poised over a yellow notepad. Michael began with polite conversation. "How have you been feeling, Mrs. Carver?" I tilted my head slightly. "Oh, some days are fuzzy. Some days are fine." It was a truthful answer, just not in the way they thought. He asked simple questions first. The date, the president's name, my address. I answered them slowly, occasionally pausing, occasionally correcting myself. Just enough doubt to support their narrative. Then he shifted. "Have you considered appointing your son as legal guardian in case your cognitive state declines further?" There it was. The trap presented as concern. I folded my hands neatly in my lap. "Would that mean he controls my finances?" "Yes," Michael said smoothly. "To protect you." Protect. The word nearly made me laugh. Instead, I leaned back and allowed silence to stretch. "I suppose if a judge agreed I couldn't manage myself," I murmured. Ashley leaned forward slightly, anticipation flickering in her eyes. "And how does a judge decide that?" I asked quietly. Michael explained the evaluation process. Medical records, witness testimony, behavioral documentation. Every word he spoke tightened the knot inside my chest, because I understood something now, with chilling clarity. They had already begun building a case. The pills were not just about weakening me. They were about creating medical evidence, a hidden truth buried beneath fabricated concern. But Michael made one mistake. He left his folder open when he stood to take a phone call on the porch. And in that brief window, I saw it. A draft petition for guardianship, signed by Derek. Dated 2 weeks prior, before the lawyer had ever consulted me. Before Thanksgiving. Before this polite charade, it wasn't preparation, it was execution. My own son had already declared me mentally incompetent. The realization did not break me. It hardened me. When Michael returned, I smiled faintly. I think, I said softly, I would like a second opinion before making any decisions. Ashley's pen stopped moving. Derek's jaw tightened. That's not necessary, Mom, he said quickly, but I held his gaze. Yes, I replied, my voice steady now. It is. And for the first time since this began, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not confidence, not calculation, fear. Because in that moment, he realized something was shifting. He had expected confusion. He had prepared for weakness. He had not prepared for resistance. After they left the room, I walked slowly to the kitchen sink and gripped the counter. My reflection stared back at me in the window. Older, yes, but not finished. They wanted to exclude me from my own life. They wanted inheritance before death. They wanted control, disguised as care. They wanted a story where I faded quietly into incompetence. Instead, they were about to witness something else entirely. Revenge. And I would make sure that when karma came, it came publicly. But first, I needed an ally, and I knew exactly where to find one. The ally I chose was not a friend. She was not family. She was not someone who would feel sorry for me. Her name was Rachel Whitmore, and she had once fined my late husband for a zoning violation back in 1998. That was how I knew she was thorough. Rachel was 58, sharp as broken glass, and ran a small elder law practice above a bakery in downtown Davenport. I found her number in the county directory and called from the parking lot of a grocery store, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. I need to speak with you privately, I said. It's about guardianship and possible financial exploitation. There was a pause. Come in tomorrow morning, she replied. Bring everything. Everything. So I did. The orange prescription bottle, the pharmacist's written statement, my handwritten notes of Derek's porch conversation, the partial copy of the guardianship petition I had photographed with my old flip phone when Michael stepped outside. Rachel read in silence for nearly 20 minutes. Her face did not soften. It sharpened. Linda, she said finally, folding her hands on the desk, this is not just family drama. This is attempted legal manipulation. If he medicated you without consent and is building a case for incapacity, that's serious. The word serious felt almost too small. She asked me questions, detailed ones, dates, symptoms, who had access to my medical records, whether I had ever signed power of attorney documents. I hadn't. That alone frustrated whatever strategy they had planned. Here's what we do, Rachel said. First, you get a full, independent medical evaluation, not one arranged by your son. Second, we file a formal objection to any guardianship petition immediately. Third, we consider reporting prescription fraud. Fraud, I swallowed. He's still my son, I whispered. Rachel's gaze did not waver. And you are still a person. That sentence stayed with me. For years, my identity had been mother first, widow second, worker third. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being simply Linda. When I returned home that afternoon, Derek was waiting at the kitchen table. You were gone a long time, he said. I had coffee with a friend, I replied calmly. He studied me. You seem clearer today. I feel clearer, I said, meeting his eyes directly. That was the first real crack in his composure. That night, I overheard him arguing with Ashley in the living room. You said it would be faster, he snapped. She was deteriorating, Ashley hissed back. You said she was confused. She was. The past tense did not escape me. I stood in the hallway, invisible, and for the first time, I heard doubt in his voice, which meant Ashley had been the one pushing hardest, the architect. But here was the truth they did not understand. I had built my life, brick by brick, after my husband died. I had survived night shifts, back pain, loneliness, Christmases where money was thin. I had endured Thanksgiving dinners where I felt excluded from other families' warmth. I did not break easily. The independent medical evaluation happened 3 days later. The doctor, a neurologist in Bettendorf, spent nearly 2 hours testing memory, reasoning, reaction time. I answered confidently, calmly. without medication clouding my mind. When he finished, he looked genuinely puzzled. Mrs. Carver, your cognitive function is well within normal range for your age. There are no signs of dementia. I almost cried then, not from sadness, from validation. Rachel filed the objection that same afternoon, which meant if Derek and Michael attempted to proceed with guardianship, they would face immediate legal resistance. But escalation was inevitable, because 2 nights later, Derek walked into my bedroom without knocking. "Did you see another lawyer?" he demanded. There it was. Confrontation. "Yes," I answered simply. His face hardened in a way I had never seen before. "You don't trust me?" Trust. The word felt foreign now. "I trusted you with my life," I said quietly. He flinched. For a moment, I saw something flicker behind his anger. Guilt. Then Ashley's voice echoed from the hallway. "She's manipulating you, Derek." Manipulation. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I realized then that this was no longer about money alone. It was about control. And the next move would determine everything. Christmas decorations appeared in our living room 2 weeks later, not because I put them there, because Ashley did. She moved through my house like she was staging a property listing, rearranging furniture, suggesting paint colors, making subtle comments about updating the space. The message was clear. She saw this house as future inheritance, and she believed I was already excluded from the timeline. But something unexpected happened in early December. Rachel called me. "Linda," she said, "the pharmacy traced the prescription. It was issued using a telehealth service. The account email belongs to Ashley." The room tilted slightly. Not from weakness, from revelation. "So Derek didn't write it?" I asked. "No, but he picked it up." That distinction mattered, because it meant conspiracy, not just favoritism, not just toxic family dynamics, premeditation. Rachel advised filing a police report for identity theft and prescription fraud. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that call. I stared at the Christmas tree lights blinking softly in the corner. I remembered Derek at 5 years old, placing handmade ornaments on those same branches. How had we arrived here? When he came home that evening, I asked him to sit down. No pretending, no confusion, just clarity. "I know about the prescription," I said. The silence that followed was deafening. His face drained of color. Ashley stepped forward defensively. "You're overreacting," she said quickly. "It was just to help you sleep." "Sleep?" I repeated. "You were anxious," Derek added weakly. "You tried to have me declared incompetent," I said evenly. "You filed a petition before speaking to me." Ashley's mask slipped first. "You're old," she snapped. "You can't manage this property forever. Derek deserves stability. We deserve a future." There it was. The hidden truth, finally spoken aloud. Inheritance before death. Convenience over conscience. Derek looked between us, trapped between loyalty and ambition. And in that moment, I saw the boy he once was. Scared, but choosing wrong. "I filed objections," I continued calmly. "And the pharmacy has records. If this continues, I will press charges." The word charges echoed. For the first time, Ashley looked afraid. Derek's voice cracked. "You'd send your own son to jail?" I met his gaze steadily. "You tried to erase me while I was still alive." The tension in the room felt electric. This was escalation, not quiet documentation anymore. Open war. Ashley grabbed her purse. "This isn't over," she hissed. No, it wasn't. Because what they didn't know yet was that Rachel had uncovered something else. Something tied, not just to medication, but to a second will filed electronically in a county database. One that listed my date of anticipated incapacity. A date only 2 weeks away. And when I learned what else was attached to that filing, I understood the full scale of their plan. Christmas would not bring reconciliation. It would bring exposure. Public, irreversible, and devastating. The date listed on that electronic filing was December 18th, 3 days before Christmas, 3 days before the annual Carver family dinner that I had hosted for over 20 years. That was not a coincidence. It was strategy. Rachel invited me to her office again, and this time her expression was grave, not sharp. They filed a second draft will through an online estate platform, she said, sliding printed documents across her desk. "It names Derek as sole executor and beneficiary upon your declared incapacity. Not death. Incapacity. My fingers traced the words slowly. Anticipated medical decline. Projected need for guardianship. Attached was a scheduled evaluation appointment. A private physician I had never heard of. Paid in advance. They were building a timeline, I whispered. Yes, Rachel replied. And if that evaluation had gone uncontested, a judge might have granted temporary guardianship before you even understood what happened. Temporary. The word sounded harmless, but I knew better. Temporary control becomes permanent silence. I sat back, absorbing it all. The manipulation, the planning, the quiet coordination between Derek and Ashley. This was no impulsive act of a misguided son. This was premeditated betrayal, layered carefully under the language of concern. What do we do? I asked. Rachel leaned forward. We confront them publicly, at a moment when witnesses matter. And that was when I knew Christmas dinner would not be canceled. It would become the stage. The following week, I moved through the house as if nothing had changed. I baked cookies, I wrapped gifts, I even complimented Ashley's choice of gold ribbon for the tree. Derek avoided my eyes. The house felt tense, like the air before a winter storm. On December 18th, the day of their scheduled evaluation, I did not show up. Instead, Rachel filed a formal injunction blocking any temporary guardianship until a full court review. She attached my independent neurological report and the pharmacy fraud documentation. By the time Derek received notice, the clock had already turned. He came home furious. You embarrassed me in front of the doctor, he snapped. I never agreed to see that doctor, I said calmly. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Harder. For him. That night, I heard him pacing in his room, voice raised in a heated argument with Ashley. She was supposed to be confused by now, Ashley said sharply. The words froze me in place. Supposed to be. Planned deterioration. It was no longer about assumption. It was expectation. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, from defensive to decisive. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. The Mississippi River looked like steel beneath the winter sky. Family members began arriving at 5 o'clock. My sister Elaine, my cousin Margaret, 2 distant nieces I had not seen since last summer. Laughter filled the house. Ashley wore a red dress and a strained smile. Derek moved through the room stiffly. At precisely 6:30, as everyone gathered near the dining table, I stood and tapped my wine glass lightly. I have something to share, I said. The room quieted. Derek's shoulders tensed. Ashley's eyes narrowed. For the past 2 months, I continued steadily. There has been discussion about my mental health and capacity to manage my affairs. Whispers. Confused glances. Elaine looked alarmed. I recently learned, I said, lifting a folder from the sideboard, that a guardianship petition was filed on my behalf without my consent, along with a second will transferring my home and savings upon anticipated incapacity. Gasps rippled through the room. Derek stood abruptly. Mom, this isn't appropriate. Oh, it's appropriate, I interrupted softly. I handed copies of the documents to Elaine and Margaret, and there was also unauthorized medication obtained using my name. Ashley's composure cracked. That's a lie, she said too quickly. Rachel stepped forward from the hallway. She had arrived quietly 20 minutes earlier. No, Rachel said evenly. It's documented. Silence swallowed the room whole. Derek looked like he had been struck. You brought a lawyer to Christmas? He whispered. You brought a plan to erase me, I replied. The confrontation was not loud. It was devastating. Family members stared at Derek with disbelief. At Ashley, with thinly veiled disgust. Elaine spoke first. You tried to have your mother declared incompetent? Derek opened his mouth. No words came. Ashley grabbed her purse again. This is ridiculous, she snapped. We were protecting our future. Our future, not mine. Karma does not always roar. Sometimes it unfolds quietly in front of witnesses. By the end of the evening, Derek had retreated upstairs. Ashley left before dessert, and something irreversible had broken. But the war was not over. Because 2 days later, I received a court summons. Derek had decided to fight back. The official petition arrived on December 27th. He had refiled. Despite the injunction, despite the exposure, despite Christmas. Reading the paperwork felt like swallowing glass. The claims were sharper now. Erratic behavior, paranoia, false accusations against caregivers. It was a counterattack. Ashley's fingerprints were all over the language. Rachel remained calm. "This is escalation," she said, "which means they're desperate." The hearing was scheduled for mid-January, 3 weeks away. 3 weeks of tension inside a house that no longer felt like home. Derek barely spoke to me. When he did, his tone carried resentment rather than regret. "You didn't have to humiliate me," he said one evening. "You didn't have to betray me," I answered. We circled each other like strangers. But I noticed something else. Ashley stopped coming around. Rumors had spread after Christmas. Margaret, it turned out, had a friend who volunteered at the county courthouse. Word traveled fast in a small Iowa community. Family drama had become public scrutiny, and Ashley did not like scrutiny. 2 weeks before the hearing, Rachel uncovered financial transfers. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Derek had moved funds from a joint emergency account I had added him to years ago after his father died. Not illegal, but revealing. The pattern showed urgency. Preparation. "Linda," Rachel said carefully, "if we present this, it demonstrates motive. Motive. Inheritance before death." The courtroom on the day of the hearing felt colder than the river in December. I wore the same navy slacks I had worn when Michael first visited. Derek sat across the aisle, alone. Ashley was not there. When the judge asked him why he believed guardianship was necessary, his voice faltered. "She forgets things," he said weakly. The judge reviewed the independent medical report. The pharmacy fraud investigation. Reviewed the electronic will filing. The silence stretched. Finally, the judge looked directly at Derek. "Filing for guardianship is not a tool for financial acceleration," she said evenly. "It is a protective measure for genuine incapacity. This petition is denied." Denied. The word echoed like a gavel inside my chest. Relief washed over me, but it was not joy. It was clarity. Because as Derek left the courtroom without meeting my eyes, I understood something final. Even if he had lost legally, something deeper had already died. And as I stepped outside into the sharp January air, Rachel touched my arm gently. "This part is over," she said, "but I knew another decision awaited me, one that would determine whether my story ended in bitterness or rebirth. And that decision would change Derek's life far more than any judge ever could." After the hearing, the house felt hollow. Not quiet in a peaceful way, quiet in the way abandoned places are quiet. As if sound itself had chosen not to linger. Derek moved through rooms without looking at me. Doors closed more softly than before. Footsteps paused outside my bedroom sometimes, then retreated. For the first week, we barely spoke. And in that silence, something unexpected surfaced. Not anger, grief. I found myself remembering small, ordinary moments that hurt more than the betrayal itself. Derek, at 11, proudly showing me a school essay titled, "My Mom is My Hero." Derek, at 17, hugging me after his first breakup, crying into my shoulder. I realized something painful then. The son I loved still existed somewhere inside him, but he had been buried under ambition, insecurity, and Ashley's manipulation. Rachel called me one afternoon in early February. "There's another development," she said carefully. She had obtained bank records through legal discovery during the guardianship case. Ashley had been receiving steady transfers from Derek's personal account for nearly a year. Thousands of dollars, labeled consulting fees. Consulting for what? Rachel also found emails between them. One sentence stood out so clearly it felt carved into stone. "Once she's declared incompetent, the house can be refinanced immediately." Refinanced. Not preserved. Not lived in. Used. Liquidated. That was when I understood something I had resisted seeing. This was never about building a future together. It was about extraction. Ashley had not just influenced Derek. She had exploited him. And he had let it happen because it was easier than confronting his own financial failures. He had lost his job at the logistics company months earlier. I discovered that accidentally when I answered a call from a debt collector looking for him. He hadn't told me. He had pretended to leave for work every morning. The truth landed like a slow, heavy weight. Desperation had opened the door. Manipulation had walked in. But betrayal had still been his choice. One evening, I found him sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring at unpaid bills spread in front of him. His shoulders looked smaller somehow, deflated. He flinched. "You weren't supposed to find out." Silence stretched between us. I thought if I could just stabilize things, he said, voice cracking, we could fix everything. Fix. The word sounded so fragile. You tried to erase me, I replied softly. Tears filled his eyes then. Real tears. Not defensive, not angry. Ashamed. I didn't think it would go that far, he whispered, but it had. Trust, it shatters under pressure. In the weeks that followed, Ashley disappeared completely. Her number disconnected. Her apartment lease terminated early. Rachel later confirmed she had moved to another state. Gone. Like a storm that leaves wreckage behind. But the wreckage remained inside my home, inside my heart. One Sunday morning, I walked through the house slowly, touching walls, furniture, memories. I realized something with absolute clarity. This house no longer felt like sanctuary. It felt like a battlefield. And I did not want to spend the rest of my life living inside a place defined by betrayal. That afternoon, I called Rachel. I want to change my will, I said. Her response was gentle. That's entirely your right. I took a deep breath. And I want to sell the house. That decision did not come from anger. It came from rebirth. Because sometimes, revenge is not about punishment. Sometimes it is about reclaiming control. But Derek had no idea what I was planning. And when he found out, the confrontation that followed would force him to face a truth far more painful than any courtroom ruling. I told Derek about the house 2 weeks later. He was standing by the sink, washing a coffee mug when I said it. I've listed the property, I stated calmly. The mug slipped from his hands and shattered in the basin. What? He whispered. I'm selling, I continued evenly, and I finalized a new will. His face drained of color. You can't do that, he said, panic rising. This is our home. Our. The word felt almost surreal. It has always been my home, I replied quietly. He stepped closer. Where will I go? There it was. Not an apology. Not regret. Fear. Fear of instability. Fear of consequences. For a moment, I saw the boy who had once clung to me after his father's funeral. But this time, I did not move to comfort him. I will give you time, I said. 3 months. His voice broke. You're punishing me. I held his gaze steadily. Number. I'm protecting myself. The difference mattered. Because punishment comes from anger. Protection comes from self-respect. He sank into a chair, hands covering his face. I messed everything up, he whispered. Yes, he had. But what he did not understand yet was this. My new will did not exclude him entirely. It simply removed his control. A trust had been established through Rachel's firm, managed independently, conditional, structured. If Derek maintained stable employment and completed financial counseling for 3 consecutive years, he would receive limited distributions. If not, the majority of my estate would be donated to a community elder support fund. Not revenge in the traditional sense, but accountability, karma shaped into legal form. The day the for sale sign appeared in the front yard, Derek stood on the porch for a long time, staring at it. Neighbors drove past slowly. Word had already spread about the court hearing. Toxic family drama does not stay private in small towns. He finally turned to me. I thought you would always forgive me, he said quietly. I answered with honesty. I might, I said, but forgiveness does not mean forgetting consequences. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in months. Because for the first time since October, I no longer felt trapped inside someone else's plan. I had reclaimed my narrative. And as winter slowly gave way to early spring, something else began to change. Not just in me, in Derek. Because loss can sometimes do what confrontation cannot. It can force reflection. But whether that reflection would lead to redemption or deeper resentment remained uncertain. And the final chapter of our story would not be written in a courtroom. It would be written in a single conversation. One that would decide whether our bond ended in permanent exile or transformed into something entirely new. The house sold faster than I expected. A young couple from Des Moines made an offer in early April. They wanted space for children. They loved the big oak tree in the backyard. They said the place felt warm. Warm. I stood in the living room during the final walkthrough and tried to feel that warmth again. Instead, I felt closure. Derek had 3 weeks left before the closing date. He had found part-time work at a hardware store across town. Not glamorous, Not what he once imagined for himself, but honest. I noticed he no longer avoided my eyes. He no longer whispered on the porch. He no longer watched me drink. One evening, a week before we were scheduled to move out, he knocked on my bedroom door. He had not knocked in months. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I nodded. We sat across from each other at the small desk where I used to pay bills after long hospital shifts. The same desk where I once helped him fill out college applications. "I've been seeing a counselor," he began, voice steady but low. "Rachel recommended someone." That surprised me. She said if I wanted any chance at rebuilding trust, I needed to understand why I was willing to do what I did. "And why were you?" I thought. "I felt like I was drowning," he admitted. "After I lost my job, I couldn't tell you. You've always been the strong one, the provider." I felt like a failure. "Ashley kept saying this house was just sitting there, that you didn't need all of it, that we could all benefit. The language of justification. But it stopped being about helping," he continued. "It became about control. And I let it." There was no defensiveness in his voice now. No blame shifted onto Ashley, just ownership. "I read the emails again," he said. "The ones the court requested. I don't recognize the person writing them." I believed him. Not because I wanted to, because I saw the shame in his posture, the weight of consequence pressing down on him. "I can't undo what I did," he said softly. "I know that." No, he couldn't. Trust, once cracked, never returns to its original shape. It reforms differently, weaker in some places, stronger in others. "I don't expect the inheritance," he added quickly, "or the trust, or anything." That was the first selfless sentence he had spoken in months. Silence stretched between us. "I was angry," I said finally. "But more than that, I was hurt. You didn't just file papers. You questioned my reality. You tried to make me doubt my own mind." His eyes filled with tears. "I know. And I survived. Because I chose not to disappear," I continued. "Not because you protected me." He nodded. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he whispered. "Maybe not. But forgiveness," I realized, was not a transaction. It was a boundary. "I forgive you," I said slowly. "But forgiveness does not erase consequences. The trust stays. The structure stays. My independence stays." He swallowed hard. "I understand." And for the first time since October, I felt something shift that was not anger, not grief, not revenge. Relief. Because justice had already unfolded. Not in humiliation. Not in jail. But in exposure and accountability. The boy who once promised to take care of me was gone, but perhaps a better man was beginning to emerge. Closing day arrived on a bright morning in late April. I signed the final documents with steady hands. The proceeds from the sale transferred into accounts Rachel had structured carefully. A portion secured for my retirement. A portion placed into the conditional trust. A significant portion allocated to a local elder advocacy organization that supports seniors facing financial manipulation. Karma does not always strike like lightning. Sometimes it grows slowly, like spring after a brutal winter. I moved into a smaller townhouse near the river. 2 bedrooms, sunlight in the mornings. No memories attached to betrayal. Derek rented a small apartment closer to his new job. We did not move together. That separation mattered. Distance, I learned, can protect love from turning toxic. On my first evening in the townhouse, I stood by the window watching the river flow. The same river that had reflected the October fog the morning I first tasted bitterness in my lemon water. It felt like another lifetime. I thought about the words that had once defined my fear: guardianship, incapacity, excluded, inheritance before death. And I realized something profound. The greatest revenge was not punishing Derek. It was refusing to be erased. Refusing to be labeled incompetent for someone else's convenience. Refusing to let manipulation define the end of my story. Months later, on Thanksgiving, Derek came over with a pumpkin pie he baked himself. Slightly uneven crust, too much cinnamon. We both laughed at that. Laughter did not mean everything was healed. It meant we were trying, and that was enough. If you are listening to my story tonight, perhaps you recognize pieces of it. Maybe you have felt the sting of betrayal inside your own family. Maybe you have been underestimated, manipulated, almost excluded from your own life. Here is what I learned at 62. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is a woman quietly gathering evidence, quietly reclaiming power, quietly rewriting her will, and standing firm in a courtroom when someone expects her to crumble. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in karma-based justice and the strength of women who refuse to disappear, then let me know. Like this video so more women can hear it. Comment below if you have ever had to choose yourself after betrayal. And subscribe, because there are many more stories about family drama, hidden truths, and the kind of revenge that rebuilds instead of destroys. I am Linda Carver, and I am still here.